Welcome everyone to today's webinar on HMEx, and my name is Phil Anthony. I'm with ICC as a Digital Code Solution Specialist. You may hear mention of Digital Codes Premium as we're doing some of this, and we do have the monthly webinars on different features and such. Today we are focusing on the HMEx Assistant. And what we'll do is we'll do the presentation here. I'll let Lynn and Jake introduce themselves right after I'm done speaking here, but I do want to make you aware that we are recording this. Everyone who has registered will receive a recording after it and a follow-up email. And during the session here, if you are interested in asking questions, feel free to post in the chat. It's probably best that, post to everyone so people can see the questions, and we'll be monitoring it. And if there are questions that we feel we should pause Lynn as she's doing the presentation and address them now, we will. If we don't get to them during the presentation there, we will circle back around to answer every one of them. And there may be occasions where we can answer them with quick, short text in the chat. And then at the end, if there's a question you feel the need to ask verbally, you can raise your hand and we'll be able to unmute you and be able to ask it. So I am going to fade off in the distance here, and I will turn it over to Lynn, and the show is on.
Very good. Thank you, Phil, and thank you for giving us this platform this morning to demonstrate how HMEx, which stands for, by the way, Hazardous Materials Expert Assistance, can either help you establish a hazardous materials program or help you elevate one if you already have one. This is a tool that helps users essentially classify and manage hazardous materials for fire and building code compliance. So I am Lynn Kilpatrick. If you don't know me, I've been around a long time. I've been a code official for 30 years. I was with the Seattle Fire Department for 21 years. I ran their hazardous materials program. And then I was a fire marshal down in California for the Sunnyvale Department of Public Safety. And I have been immersed in this hazardous materials issue for many, many years. My background, I have a chemical engineering degree as well. So I actually enjoy this topic very much. And this is a fabulous tool, and we're happy to share it with you today. With me, I've got Jake Price. Jake is going to be monitoring the chat. So do please feel free to drop questions in the chat. And as Phil mentioned, we'll take questions at the end. So there are two primary features to the platform, to HMEx. There's a chemical search feature, and this is obviously very useful. Those of you who are either applying or enforcing the code know that it's very challenging to essentially find chemical hazard classes to verify and validate the information that comes in from architects and designers. And if you're an architect or designer on the call, it's also very challenging, as you know, to find those classifications based on the fire and building code classification system. So the chemical search feature, we'll start with that. There's a couple different ways that you can search for chemicals. The easiest and best way to search for a chemical, and the most unique way, is to search by the chemical abstract service number. If you put that number in, you will see that it will essentially bring up all the chemicals in the database with that CAS number. If there are varying concentrations for that chemical, those will be shown. If there are different forms for the chemical, that will also be shown. The other way to search for chemicals is by chemical name. And sometimes the names get very complex and they can be a little bit tricky. So there's a wildcard that lets you essentially search the chemical database. In this case, when the wildcard is sort of at the end of the search term, you'll get an index search. If you search for acetic with the wildcard at the beginning of the search term, you're essentially going to get a text search. So this is going to pull up any chemical in the database that has, in this case, acetic in the name. So once you have decided on the chemical you're interested in, you can pull this up. You will get essentially a chemical detail page. And on this page, you can see it starts obviously with the CAS number. At the top of the page, you're able to see the NFPA 704 hazard ratings for this chemical, which most of you are probably very familiar. The building and fire code require this for building signage when there's hazardous materials either stored or used in the building. So at the top of the page, you'll also get information about the identification of the chemical, including synonyms. You'll get physical and chemical property information, including just some of the properties, but also the flammability information will be available here. And then toxicity data, if that's available, will actually be shown over here too. So you'll be getting the LD and LC50 data to establish toxicity. If we keep scrolling down a little bit, we'll come to the section of the page that offers the I-code hazard classes. So you're probably very familiar that the code essentially identifies physical and health hazard materials for these various properties. So this is where you're going to find those hazard classes based on the Fire and Building Code classification system. And something that is also new here is you will see that you have the ability to select the code edition. And traditionally, this has not been an important aspect of classifying the chemicals, but it is becoming important. So in the 2024 edition of the Fire and Building Code, for example, you will start to see that what we have known to be the flammable gas category, and it has always just been flammable gas, that category now has been broken down into class or category 1A and 1B flammable gases. So since the code is starting to introduce these new hazard classes, and those hazard classes are essentially based on the GHS, which stands for the Globally Harmonized System of Classification, and those are the classifications that you see in a safety data sheet, it's becoming important to be able to find the Fire and Building Code classifications based on the code edition. So you will have that flexibility to toggle back and forth between the various code editions. And in this additional section, we are starting to provide for the users the GHS hazard classifications, and these are the classifications that you will see on a safety data sheet. So this is just an additional information provided on the chemical details. If you keep scrolling, you'll also come to the DOT information. So if you need to know at any point the classification or the packing groups and hazard classes for DOT, that's made available. Federal regulatory program information is also available. So this is going to be your EPCRA, SARA Title III, OSHA process safety management information as well. And if you keep scrolling down here at the bottom, you'll come to the compatibility section. So this allows a code user to essentially compare the chemical that you're looking at with another chemical in the database. So I searched for and found, in this case, nitric acid, and it allows me to check the compatibility. And you can see here the consequences are sort of shown at the bottom. And in this case, it shows us that these materials, if mixed together, can generate heat by the chemical reaction, fire from the exothermic reaction. And this is an EPA DOT FEMA methodology that is being applied here, where a reactivity group number is assigned to all the chemicals in the database. And there's a matrix kind of going on in the background that compares these chemical families for compatibility. So that's where this information is coming from. One of the other things that I want to mention is if you come up here with and toggle into this more information button, you'll see these little blue icons appear. And what this allows the user to do is essentially click on them, and there is a knowledge center in the background. So this allows the user to either see definitions of the various terms that are used on the page and throughout. And if there are fire building code definitions provided, they will be shown here. In this case, LD50 doesn't have a definition, but you should be able to see, in this case, the definitions also for the various hazard classes. So anywhere you see an icon, you're able to sort of click into the Knowledge Center to get more information about this. I'm going to pause right there. Any questions about the chemical search feature? What this is obviously good for, as I mentioned, if you are an architect or designer or a facility operator and you're trying to complete the hazardous material inventory statements for the code officials, you'll easily be able to find this classification information here. If you're a code official and you're receiving those inventory statements and information, whether it's from an operating permit submittal or from a new construction permit application, the inventory statement, you're looking to validate the information that comes in from the architects and from the facilities. And this is a very easy way to look up the various chemicals, find the hazard classes that should be on the inventory statement. So if you're not seeing class 2 combustible liquid, class 1 water reactive, corrosive, and toxic on an inventory statement for acetic anhydride, then you're going to want to question who's compiling that information. So it's a way to verify and validate the information that's coming in. I'm going to pause for a minute. If there's no questions, I will go ahead and move on to the inventory management portion of the system. And yes, you are allowed to print. I saw Jake put that in there. You are allowed to print each page once you've found the chemical details. So the inventory management, this is a portion of the system that facility operators and architects, design engineers will find most useful. Code officials aren't generally required, obviously, to manage chemical inventories. They're looking for the facilities that they regulate to manage those inventories. So this is an opportunity. One of the big challenges is a lot of times the architects, designers, and facility operators, they don't know what the code official is looking for or wanting in terms of information to be submitted. So this is a tool that lets architects and facility operators create those reports, manage their chemical inventories, specifically to provide information to code officials in the format that a code official would want it. So this is designed to essentially allow the users to manage fairly complex facilities at one time. So you can manage inventories for different businesses. You can manage different sites, different facilities for that business, different buildings at the site, different floor levels in the building, different areas on the floor. And the HMEx allows you to create different inventory types. So right now, the inventory types that the system manages are indoor control areas, outdoor control areas, and group H occupancies, except for group H5, which are the semiconductor fabrication facilities. So the reason for those inventory types may be pretty evident, but there are maximum allowable quantities that differ for each one of those inventory types. So there's a set of MAQs for indoor control areas. There's a separate set of MAQs for outdoor control areas. And again, the H occupancies, once you have an H occupancy, you don't exactly have maximum allowable quantities, but what the system is mapping to are detached building quantities. So if you have materials in an H occupancy that are required to be detached over certain quantities, that's what the system is looking for. So this is essentially just a list of the inventories that I've got created so far. And the way you would do this is you would create a new inventory. This is all user-defined information at the top here, site ID, facility ID. And again, you need to choose your code edition that you're working from. We go back as far as 2018 and 2024 is up and running. So obviously the reason for that is there are changes and differences between the different code editions for the maximum allowable quantities. And coming in the 2024 edition, if you're not on it already, you will see the hazard class differences in addition to the MAQ differences. So I'm just going to choose an indoor control area. And this is a user-defined field for building ID. The user can select their occupancy group and occupancy class. You can define whether or not the building is sprinklered throughout or unsprinklered. If it is sprinklered throughout, you can select your sprinkler design. You can identify the grade level in which the inventory is located. And you can see there's many options for selecting multi-story buildings. I'm going to choose floor 1. And then the control area, I'm limited to the 4 control areas that the code allows. So I'm going to choose control area 1 on floor 1, but you could see if I had chosen floor 3 that I'd be limited to 2 control areas. So I'm going back to 1 control area, first control area. This is just a free optional field. You can define the control area if you want to use something more specific and user-friendly for your own team rather than just control area 1. And you can define and make someone responsible for essentially monitoring or keeping up to date that inventory. And you can see now that the demo is part of our list of inventories that we're able to manage. And if I select that, this is essentially at the top of the page here, information that I've just put in. But if I scroll down a little bit, I'm able to essentially come to the inventory portion where I can add the chemicals to my inventory. And there's 2 ways to do that. You can add chemicals one by one, or you can download an Excel spreadsheet, put your inventory materials on a spreadsheet and upload it. And I'm going to show both ways. I'm going to start with the add chemicals just independently. I'm going to choose trichlorosilane. I use this as an example. This material has quite a lot of hazards, so it's a good example. You're able to add container types, location, responsible party, components, additional information that's all elective. You can identify whether it's in a pressurized system, whether it's a trade secret, internal user notes that are just unique to your team. And then there's an area here where you can add the different material quantities for storage, closed use, or open use. And in this example, I'm just going to say that we've got 100 gallons of the trichlorosilane. And we are required to identify the percent of how much we have stored is stored in either approved cabinets, gas cabinets, exhausted enclosures. Obviously, that plays into the maximum allowable quantity that we're allowed to have. So it is a required field. Because this chemical was found in the database, I'm not required to do anything with this information here related to hazard classes or NFPA 704. That information will be found. If I had searched for the chemical or searched for the chemical in my inventory and I didn't find it in the database, then I would be essentially completing this form as a user classified chemical. And for those user classified chemicals, this is where the user would essentially establish the various hazard classes and assign them for this particular material. But because we found it in the database, there is no requirement for us to add that additional information. And essentially what it's going to do now is it is going to go to the database, it's going to find those hazard classes and bring it back. And so we've added trichlorosilane to our inventory. This far left-hand column over here, the HMEx, is either going to reflect yes or no, depending on whether or not the chemical was found in the database and if it's classified by HMEx. In this case, it was in the database. So this is information on the form that we filled out. This is the quantity information. And now you can see it's brought back information about the various hazard classes assigned to trichlorosilane, as well as the NFPA 704 hazard information. So what we're able to do now is we are able to essentially go to the top of the page here and generate the hazardous material inventory statement. So this is obviously the itemized list of chemicals that are in the inventory. This is called out in chapter 50 as a required document, generally with permit applications. But you can see here that what's pre-formatted and the information that it's gathered here at the top of the header is essentially all the information that we put in about the building ID, the grade level, the control area, whether the building is sprinklered, the occupancy, and it's also identifying for us what code edition this inventory statement is based on. So obviously just a one chemical inventory, pretty simple inventory statement. The other report that this HMEx will give you is the hazard class summary report. So this is one of the most important reports that often gets overlooked, doesn't often get asked for. by a jurisdiction. But once you have an inventory and the inventory statement, obviously what a code official is going to be wanting to do is verify these hazard classes are assigned correctly. But once you have that information, what the next most important thing to do is to identify whether or not the quantities of the various materials in the inventory have exceeded those maximum allowable quantities by hazard class. So this is the summary report, and this might look very familiar. It might look like an MAQ table, obviously, with the hazard classes and categories down here on the left-hand side, storage, closed use and open use, and the various physical states. So if we look at this particular inventory, you can see here for the class 1 flammable liquids, we have 100 gallons from our trichlorosilane is contributing to the class 1A hazard class category. It's also contributing to the aggregate of all the class 1s in the building, or in the control area, excuse me. And the MAQ is being calculated for the class 1As as well as all the class 1s here on the under the MAQ column. If we keep scrolling down, you'll see that 100 gallons is also contributing to the class 2 unstable and class 2 water reactive categories, because trichlorosilane is also water reactive and unstable. And based on the MAQ and the various information that we provided, so this MAQ is being calculated based on what floor level we were on. It's including the information about the building being sprinklered. It's also including information about how much of the material is confined to cabinets. And if we keep scrolling, we'll come to the health hazard page or health hazard table. So you can see the 100 gallons is contributing to the corrosive and toxic categories as well. And the MAQ is well above the quantity that we have. But you can see we're being red flagged to the violation of the MAQ for unstable and water reactive. Okay, so that is a one chemical inventory, which is obviously quite simple. So I'm going to jump to an example of one that has multiple materials sort of shown in it. This is an inventory that you can download the Excel spreadsheet template as the other way to add the chemicals. This is what the spreadsheet template looks like. So if you want to add chemicals using the spreadsheet, you would essentially be looking at this template. The red header columns are reflecting basically fields that the system needs in order to make a match with the chemicals that are in the database currently. So the system is looking for a concentration. It would be looking for a CAS number and a physical state. And if you have, if gas is the physical state, then it's also going to be looking for the type of gas, gaseous, liquefied, cryogen, or refrigerated. Obviously, not all materials are pure, and the system does allow for mixtures, obviously. So in those cases, what you would need to do is just type mixture as the concentration. And many mixtures don't actually have CAS numbers. So if you don't have a CAS number, in that case, what the system is looking for is a material product name. So it's really starting with concentration and CAS number and or concentration and material product name in order to match up the chemicals in the database as well as the physical state. So you'd essentially be filling this spreadsheet out for the materials in your inventory. These fields are essentially very similar to the ones that we were looking at on the form when we were filling out for the one chemical. The location, the responsible party, storage quantities, open use, closed use quantities, and then hazard classes. And the way this works then is you would fill out that spreadsheet save that as a file on your computer, and then you would choose the file and it will upload so that it will upload to look something like this. So you have the inventory uploaded now from the spreadsheet. Same thing again here in the left-hand column. This was the mixture or the basically proprietary material that we put in. We knew it wasn't going to be there, so that was not found in the database. And again, as we scroll across, we're going to see all the information about the various quantities and then the individual hazard classes for the materials. So the two reports, again, that we're able to generate are the inventory statement, which this is the itemized list of chemicals that we've got in our inventory with the hazard classes assigned here on the right-hand side. and all the sort of information about this particular inventory here at the top of the header. And then looking at the summary report, this one is going to look a bit more complex because obviously we've got more materials and we've got materials in storage and use. If we focus in this case on the flammable liquid category, once again, you can see that we've got 300 gallons of the class 1 liquids aggregate quantity. We're allowed to have 480 gallons. That's the MAQ. In closed use, we have 160. We're allowed to have 240. And in open use, we have 60. We're allowed to have 60. So in no situation here have we actually exceeded the MAQ. We're good on storage, we're good on closed use, and we're good on open use. But what's going on here is footnote B. So those of you who are familiar with the MAQ table will know that footnote B essentially indicates that you're not allowed to have more in storage and use than you're allowed to have in storage. So this is essentially aggregating the quantities in storage and use and red flagging us that in storage and use, we've exceeded the 480 gallons that we're allowed to have in storage. So you will see violations other than straight up MAQ violations being red flagged, in this case, footnote violations. So scrolling down here throughout this inventory, there's a lot of red. This is really just, for the most part, these are MAQ violations. But I did want to highlight in this particular inventory how the footnote B violation will also be present and visible to code users. So that is the inventory management, the sort of the high level view of what's going on. The other report that users are allowed to generate once their inventory is in here is you can download this inventory once the hazard classes are assigned. You're able to download this once again into Excel. So this is something where you can repurpose the data if you need to repurpose it. A lot of users have additional kind of systems where they're wanting this information to share. So there is an Excel download option in addition to these two reports that are PDF versions. One additional thing I'll say about the inventory management is you are able to kind of look at your upload history. If you have extensive inventories, for instance, this lets you identify, how many were uploaded, how many failed to upload correctly. And in addition to that, it lets you get a report to kind of drill into an error report to see which ones did not upload. And a lot of times it's just sort of a data formatting issue. There are a lot of validations that are built into the system to help users avoid some of the most common errors. One of the very common errors is trying to duplicate chemicals in the same sort of control area. So that is the inventory management at a high level, as well as chemical search. And I'm going to pause for a moment to see if we have any questions in the chat I need to answer, or any questions so far. No questions? Oh, I can't hear. If there's anything going on, I can't hear. So, okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to leave you hanging there. No, Jake is answering questions in there, so please keep asking them. And Jake, if you ever want to interrupt Lynn there, if there's a pertinent question, feel free to do that. You are doing excellent. Keep going.
Okay, so there are sort of other sort of embedded features. The system allows you to inactivate inventory statements. It allows you to delete them. You can toggle back and forth between inactive ones and active ones. The three sort of main features here, which are the chemical search, inventory management, and user management. So users on your account will all have access to these inventories if you're creating the inventories. So you can create users. The only people who will see the user management feature are the users on your account that you have sort of designated to be account administrators. So these are the folks who can essentially manage users and manage licenses. And the licenses work in a couple different ways. There are essentially two levels of licensing. There is the assistant and assistant governmental that gives users access to just the chemical search feature. You would not have access to inventory management features if you're looking to purchase the assistant or assistant governmental licenses. To access the inventory management feature, the advanced license is necessary. So, and again, user management that allows your account administrators to set up the users and essentially assign the various licenses to the users. So the system does use seat licensing. So every user that of the system is in need of a license, except for your account administrators don't and aren't required, obviously, to consume licenses. They might just be managing the system. So that is the high level view. There is obviously a knowledge center here where you can search for the various terms and information. In the background, you can search for maximum level quantities. You have access to the various MAQ tables that are being provided. ICC has generously offered to let us share that information, that copyrighted information. I'm going to pause there again for any additional questions.
I don't see anyone that's asked yet too, but as we mentioned, Jake, as you're monitoring there, if people want to raise the hand to ask a specific question verbally, we can unmute that person too.
Yeah, why don't we do that, Jake, since we're at a point where we can maybe answer their questions.
Okay. I don't see any hands raised at the moment.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
I did think though, maybe this would be a good time to mention that for all the webinar attendees, we are running a discount. So if you go to the checkout page on HMEx and you like what you saw here, you can enter the code webinar15 and get 15% off of the webinar, and also drop that code in the chat.
Yeah, and ICC, obviously, you can purchase through the ICC shop as well. We'll extend that to the ICC users as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
I see.
I was going to say, and at the beginning, we did mention we will send out a link to the recording of this webinar, and HMEx will include all that information in that email as well too.
Yeah. I see a question there about the database. So we update the information, especially all the federal regulatory information, which is changing fairly frequently. We try to make the updates to every one of those sections on an annual basis. Yeah. Hazard classes for the materials don't, change that frequently, but we are updating them obviously based on the new code requirement for the hazard classifications. Yeah.
I see we have one hand raised here. I'm not able to unmute, but Phil, if you could help me in unmuting Christy, I believe she has a question.
Let's see if I can catch that one. Looking for the hands up. I'm coming. I see it right there at the top. I'm sorry. We are now unmuted. If I can do this. Nope, it's not letting me do it. Unmute. Okay. Good to go, Christy.
So my question was about the cabinets. I see that you can list them as being in an approved cabinet, but I notice sometimes users put too much in a cabinet, so they'll exceed that cabinet's listed quantity, and that can be hard to track. Is there any way that the cabinets can kind of be listed out so you can validate how much is in that cabinet? So like if the cabinet can have 50 gallons, is there a way that you can list the cabinets individually within a control area?
Yes.
That makes sense.
I think I understand what you're saying. So there is a way that you could do that. If you are on the, if you're using the spreadsheet, what you can do is under location, or you could do it, there's a, I want to say, I think there is under, I think there's also an equipment ID section
Okay.
that lets you. So you could figure out a way to say, whatever your location is, you could specify that that location is that particular cabinet. Now that would mean that if you have acetone in 3 different cabinets and you want to keep track by cabinet, right? You're going to say, oh, cabinet 1, cabinet 2, cabinet 3. Your acetone is going to go in their inventory 3 different times. You see what
Okay.
I mean?
Yeah,
If
yes.
you want to keep track by cabinet of the quantity that's in the cabinet, then that's the only way to really do it, is to give it a unique location or a unique equipment ID.
Okay, so if they could track their, okay, it would just
If
take a
you want to
little bit
track,
of,
if you want to track it down to that particular level.
because
Yeah.
sometimes they exceed the quantity listed for the cabinet because they'll just stuff it full.
And I hear what you're saying. This is not really intended to be tracking cabinet quantities, but I think you could do it if you wanted to get down into the weeds. You know what I mean? With
Okay,
requiring them to put to report their cabinet inventory by cabinet.
okay. It's
Because
just some way to,
this is really, yeah, this is really sort of trying to establish kind of a high level view. Now you do get, this is really intended for the workstation, but if you look back at, how are we doing it here? If you look back at a chemical, you can drill back down into, obviously, this material. There is an equipment tag field that will print out as well. So this is
Hmm,
where you could tag your cabinets, right? And
yeah.
this information would come out on your inventory statement.
So then you could quickly check every cabinet that's equipment tag A, make sure it doesn't exceed its listed cabinet amount. Okay, perfect.
That's
Thank
what
you.
you could do.
Yeah,
And then you could just sort your Excel spreadsheet by equipment tag. Yeah.
perfect. Great. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Any other questions?
No one else has their hand up, so we go on and I'll keep monitoring that as well, along with Jake.
Very good. Okay, well, thank you, everyone, for joining today. As I said, this is a platform that can really help add to existing hazmat programs. The struggle with, or it can help with the struggle trying to make sure that everyone in all your inspectors are classifying chemicals the same. If somebody sends in something that says I've got 35% sulfuric acid, what is 35% sulfuric acid classified as? It will allow you to have everybody on the same page about that in terms of whether it's your plan review engineers, whether it's your inspectors. So you're going to add consistency to your teams and across your projects for how materials are classified or how you're verifying the classifications. And that is really huge and important. It really lets you sort of set a standard, a minimum standard across your program for how you're going to classify chemicals. You're not just accepting, if you're a code official, you're not just always accepting whatever comes in from the architects and design engineers, but you have a way to verify and validate the information consistently across, like I said, again, across those teams and projects. So that is huge in terms of elevating an existing program. There's a central really easy way to log in. This is a cloud-based system, so every user has their own login credentials, but as long as you've got internet access, you can log in and you can, find the information. So You can have this at if you do over-the-counter permits, which is what my jurisdiction did for many years. We had this installed at the desk. So it didn't take long when an inventory came in to just sort of check on the system to see whether or not we could validate the hazard classes, which gave us a clue how well they understood, whoever was completing the inventory, how well they understood the classification system in the fire code and classifying multiple hazards, etc. So it was easy to either accept or not accept inventory statements when you had a way to validate the information pretty quickly. Saw there was another. Yep.
Yep, looks like a hand is up, so let me unmute Monty. If you're still ready, I think I got you unmuted, Monty. Go ahead and try. Yep.
Money.
So we're getting towards the end. Just a great overview of, from a fire department aspect, we get the inventory, we enter it into the system. We'll also have to do a field validation over time, your annual inspections. Is there a way the program can follow the certain addresses? We set up a certain address for a certain location every year to put it in our annual inspections and update that program or that address for what the current inspections are.
So I would say right now, this is not going to allow you to search by address, right? So though you can search by business name. You can search by site ID and facility ID. Now, if you noticed when I did this for the demo, you can put in a facility address, but it's tied, you're not going to search by that. You'd be able to figure out what your facility address is only by drilling down into the business name. So you might have different facility addresses for the same business, is I guess what I'm trying to say, because you're going to have different, potentially different building IDs and whatnot. So I would say there's not a good way to do that, is what I guess what I'm saying. However, let me just sort of back up for a minute. So if you're a fire department who is trying to manage chemical inventories, that's kind of what I'm hearing, Monty. Is that what you're trying to do? Is you're, as the jurisdiction, trying to put in the inventory?
Well, since you worked in California, I'm in California, businesses have to submit their annual, hazardous material inventory to the public health.
Right.
If we're lucky, we get the form from public health and we can input it.
Right.
Because for years, until I saw this, for years, you just get it and okay, that's nice. You put it in a file.
Right.
But this way, some way to tie it to your existing inventory of buildings that you have to do permitting with and do your annual inspections and keep track of that inspection history. And so we'll get an update this year. Okay, how's this compared to last year? And then we'll do the physical inspection to make sure everything's still compliant. And just a way to track from year to year what's going on.
So there are some jurisdictions that are sharing the inventory template with their users. And what I'm I guess what I'm going to get at, Monty, is you're having with that SIRS program, they have some sort of a download that you can put that information on the template, or you can ask the facility. I know you may not be able to require it, but you can ask the facility to fill out this template, right? Which will essentially allow you to upload it directly. But I don't see you filling out this template as the jurisdiction. You really want the jurisdiction to fill out the template for you so that you can have it from year to year, the update. Does that make sense?
Yes, because you just, in the fire service, you have many people rotating through positions, and the training aspect and getting people up to read directions is getting harder and harder to do. And this is just a complex issue. So simply you would want them to do that. We're just doing data entry from this inspection. I'm just trying to see how this, if it would help with a fire department keeping track this way. Because right now, my first impression is better for if you have a facility that deals with hazardous materials is a good way to document and submit your inventory to, you know, your health department or other requiring situation or other requiring departments.
Right. It is the inventory management feature is more intended for the facilities and the architects and designers who need to report to you. And so you're looking for information in a particular way, in a format that you can actually like take the next step. You can verify and validate, and then you can, you know, do the plan review, et cetera. So the idea really behind the inventory management is that it's something that a facility or an architect uses and then provides to the jurisdiction.
Okay.
Now, if they can provide you, if you are interested in using that inventory management, and there are lots of jurisdictions doing that, the way I've seen them do it and have the most success is really sharing that inventory template with their users. The, you know, small mom and pops, and they say, fill this out, and then you're able to take that inventory and upload it. This will not keep track of inspections. So this is not, you know, inspection focused. It really is sort of focusing on just, you know, compliance of the inventory with the MAQ quantities at the time that you're looking at it. So, you know, you could ask for the inventory and the inventory template from your facilities, you know, when you go out to do the inspections, and they could submit it, and then you could do the evaluation. But I've seen it shared most often if a jurisdiction is looking to utilize the inventory management feature.
Yeah, so the best use for a fire department would be when they initially submit their permit, make sure they're not exceeding the allowable quantities.
And asking, making
just
sure that's right. Making sure so there's two things, right? When you're either doing an operating permit, or they're doing a new construction. Obviously, at the new construction phase, that's when you really want to, you know, make sure you get the inventory, the control area evaluation, the summary report, the hazard class summary report. But you can ask for that anytime. That's what you're not getting out of SIRS. That's what you're not getting from, right, from those annual reports, is by the inventory by control area, and then the evaluation of that inventory based on the MAQs, whether it's indoors or outdoors. So that's what you're looking for. And that is something that should be an ongoing evaluation, right? Whether you're issuing the initial permit, operating permit, or whether you're going out and doing a periodic inspection, you know, you want the facility to have a way to give you that summary report. And right now, the summary report isn't necessarily prescriptively called out in the code, but it is a requirement it's a part of the Appendix E in the fire code, which is obviously not a required appendix, but you will see the summary report kind of called out there. And, you know, obviously, you can ask for the summary report as a permit condition as well. But you're not going to see the summary report sort of prescriptively required, but it is the most helpful report in terms of evaluating compliance. You can get the inventory statement and confirm whether or not people are classifying chemicals correctly, which is important. But once you have them classified correctly, you really need to see the totals and the aggregate quantities in the control area, and that's what's challenging.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? We'll hang here for a minute, but otherwise, appreciate your time today. Really appreciate it. This is a huge time saver. Like I said, I used a legacy version of this. Some of you might have also been familiar with the legacy version. I used the legacy version of this for many years in my jurisdictions, and it's a huge time saver and gives you a lot of peace of mind that you're relying on some credible resource to actually do some verification of information coming to a jurisdiction. Thanks again, Phil. Thanks again, ICC Digital Codes, for letting us use this platform today to demonstrate HMEx.
Thank you, Lynn. I will stop the recording now. Sometimes people like to ask questions after that's done, but this concludes it. Some of us will be staying on to answer any other questions, and the recording is stopped now. Everyone have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.